Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're okay. This is becoming a bit of a an annual affair. Never knowing whether people are back from holidays or, busy doing other wonderful things. So not running one of our normal kind of lunch and learns, but really having a career and training drop-in session. So we did ask people some questions up front. Um, which thank you very much for those. Really interesting to look through some of them. So what we'll do, we will kick off with those some of those questions. In fact, there's a very a common theme emerging, but we will look at some of those questions. And please do make sure that you get into the chat because this is your opportunity to also to ask some questions as we go through this. And it could be that it's a completely new question, or it's a follow-on to something that you might have said. Please do feel free to do so. So what we will be doing is focusing, essentially, it might be the next hour. It really does depend on how many questions that we get, and we'll just might naturally come to an end earlier. But we're asking for any questions about anything PMO career related, but also PMO training related. So essentially what we have here at the House of PMO, sorry, at PMO Learning is obviously courses and things that are all for development around PMO. But my background was also focusing on careers and careers advice and stuff for people working in PMO. So it's kind of one of the things that I used to do. So feel pretty qualified to answer some of the questions as well around that kind of stuff. So in terms of getting started then, so drop your questions into chat and I mean, we have some questions already, so we'll kick off with those right now. So everybody ready? Yeah, got chat open, you know when that is? Right, let's go then. So interesting question, this one. We had quite a lot of responses. I would say that probably 80% of people asking the question was along the lines of this about future PMO roles and what's it going to look like and what will be the future of the PMO beyond 2025 and basically questions around that kind of theme. So interestingly, obviously got different views on this. It's a little bit of a crystal ball, isn't it? Because who knows what some of the roles are going to really be like beyond 2025. You know, how far are we looking on into the future? And we did some thinking around this, but for me personally, I want to kick off with but I think that obviously a big part of the role is already around things like reporting and insights, which are there to help our organizations and execs to what we might call decision support. And it's obvious right now that data and the data technologies that are already around and will continue to evolve, mainly based from the advances around AI technologies. I certainly think that it will be a part of the role that will become smarter. It'll be hopefully become more accurate. I think more, but it from a PMO point of view, what does that mean for the individuals? I certainly do think that it'll be one of those kind of skill development areas that will become more and more popular, and you'll start to see more and more of that being available, whether that be through somebody like us, like PMO Learning, or through indeed some of the large language model type things like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, all of those kind of places to help you to develop those skills. So that will be my first one. Will be, there's going to be advances in the data analytics and the tech advances that are purely around looking at the tools. I think already today, many of us are dabbling and certainly starting to use things like from Microsoft in terms of the Power BI. I think this stuff's going to get slicker and slicker. And I think it will be certainly one element of the a future role around if you're working within PMO that you're going to have to kind of understand not just the data aspects of it, but how these things are working. And of course, there's the second part to that, which is what we're going to be doing with all this wonderful data. So probably a nice one for you to come in, Eileen. If we got better data and better outputs from our reporting and analysis, what do you think it'll look like for people working in PMO?
I just want to give an example of potentially how that's used, and I've put my response to that in the chat. So the example I often give is much more information is available about the information we have. Let me give you an example. So Lindsay, it runs a project for us in the PMO. She, the kind of our standards are we need a project report, inputting to the PMO by first thing Monday morning. We give people the weekend just to kind of catch up. So 9 o'clock Monday morning, your project report has to come in. Lindsay sends a project report every Friday, every Monday morning. I get Lindsay's report and it's green on it. I'm not worried. However, what AI can now do with some sentiment analysis, it says, hold on a minute, I think you need to go and have a chat with Lindsay. And I'm going, why do I want to have a chat with Lindsay? Every report is in on a Friday, on a Monday morning, it's always a green. Well, yes, because what's happened is Lindsay used to do a report on a Friday night, 4:30, really kind of chatty. Over the last 6 weeks, it's gone from 4:30 on a Friday night to 7 o'clock on a Friday night to 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning to 11 o'clock on a Saturday night to 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. And also the language has gone from quite kind of chatty the way Lindsay is to something kind of quite terse and quite different. And so AI will have spot some of those things, then we don't have the time or the attention to look at the information in that much detail. But essentially what it's flagging up is something's happening on the project or something's happening with Lindsay that says the world is not as it was 6 weeks ago. Go and have a kind of a chat with Lindsay. Now, I don't believe we would spot that by looking, we might spot, oh, it's a bit later than normal, but we wouldn't have it in our head constantly that that trend is actually kind of moving, and the language that Lindsay's using is very different. So I think we'll have an awful lot of kind of AI. And people often, you'll see them talk about social media, that AI, we've got lots of AI people working for us, kind of extra bods. And it's this kind of data analysis that will highlight things that says, actually, I think you need to go and have a chat with Lindsay. There's just something that's happened on this plan. We've got kind of certain plans that kind of haven't been updated or doing updates that don't make holistic sense. And I think what it'll do is it'll change our focus from trying to do some of that analysis to try and dealing with some of the sources of the kind of the challenges that project and program managers are facing that we previously weren't aware about.
Yeah. We'll come back to the AI stuff because there's some more things that are already happening right now in terms of developments. But it leads us nicely on with a question from Rod about I've heard that PMO will partner more with execs and support the business strategies. Do you agree? And are you able to talk to what that would look like in terms of implementation? That's definitely the kind of thing that's right up your street, Eileen, isn't it? Because you've been looking at and thinking a lot about PMOs as a kind of business function, which sits really well with that. Do you want to take that question?
Yes, I also think what we're starting to see now is a recognition that having a corporate view of how PMOs can support overall delivery rather than just kind of saying actually a project office here and a project office there. We're seeing more and more visibility of a joined up view, in which case somebody needs to kind of sit and own that view. And typically that's where we're seeing more and more people of the PMO director out there. And whether that's the PMO manager of the enterprise portfolio office, who's essentially doing the role, or whether it's a defined role as a PMO director, I think is becoming more and more prevalent. I also think for those people who are in a PMO manager role, there's more integration between other PMO managers that sit across the organization. So more knowledge sharing, certainly more opportunities for people to kind of move across the business to different PMOs, which was probably less easy than it was previously.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one of the other things that for me in terms of thinking about the future PMO roles is this, and we do see it to some extent already, but is more specialized roles. But I think there's also going to be some new roles. So some specialisms in terms of things like, we already see, kind of benefits managers, risk managers, business case specialists, all of those kind of things where certainly in larger organizations or in larger, certainly big programs of work where you want in or need kind of specialists, I think it will continue and will be a need. But the interesting thing is what will be potentially some new roles that we don't even know about yet. And that could even be things like the data scientist equivalent within the PMO.
Yeah,
Who knows?
definitely,
It's
definitely.
there's definitely going to be more specialisms come out, and I think it's going to be certainly one to keep an eye on. And I think, in terms of thinking about your future around PMO, if you do enjoy certainly specialize in or getting into a certain area, I would certainly be keeping an eye on, and I think we will be too, definitely, is looking at what organizations are actually thinking about and asking for. I still think at the minute, now if we were to think about and just move on to the kind of like the whole advances around AI, because I think that is probably the biggest thing that's going to have an impact on us right now. I really am interested in the tech developments that are happening. I mean, Eileen, we were at an event, weren't we, a few weeks back when they started talking about things called digital twins. I don't know if any of you have come across the term, but if you can imagine that you have somebody, let's just talk about it in terms of an individual at the moment, but if you had your kind of AI equivalent to you, and a twin in reality that would be taking off and doing some of the work that you find is quite rote or mundane, and actually it would be doing that while you're concentrating on other more deeply, more meaningful and value add type work. That's going to be an interesting one to how it will be segmented in that way. But I think digital twins has certainly got some legs, I think, and I'm certainly interested in the development that's happening around, that whole kind of AI agents as well.
Can I request triplets?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And I think one of the advances around and things that are happening now in terms of AI agents is another interesting one because you can think about it from a future of PMO roles in terms of us as individual working within PMOs. And I think the digital twin kind of chats and things that are going on with that. Again, all still quite new and where will it turn out and will our organizations actually be invested in AI technologies? Because at the minute there doesn't see too many people that are doing that. But the second part to look at it is that there's digital twin in terms of the PMO itself. And I think Eileen, you did a really good account of that when we were chatting about it, talking about that in terms of, if you remember, portfolio management and portfolio privatization. Can you remember that conversation about how the digital twin would work in that respect?
Yes, and because there's a whole load of different kind of feed-ins now to portfolio management, and it isn't just a case of a simple kind of prioritization process. And one of the challenges we've got is that when we get to kind of do the reprioritization is understanding when what work might need to finish and at what stage work can be finished. And there's a whole load of kind of implications that we don't really have the time to think about at this point. And that all of that additional kind of data will allow us to be calculated and we can just kind of work through what the implications of that are and have some more strategic conversations with the senior manager about what the decision they want to make.
Yeah. And just coming on back to this whole concept of AI agents, which is where you're having agents that are looking after, for the want of a better word, are looking after particular specialisms. So if you had a digital PMO team, each agent within it would be looking at certain aspects. So we'll have maybe a portfolio, a benefits, a risk, a change, whatever it might be, is that you've got each individual agent that is looking at and dealing with those aspects of project program or portfolio delivery. And it be us that's in charge of our team of AI agents.
Yeah.
That's where it's going at the minute. That's the kind of things that people are talking about in terms of future of work. And if you're interested and you're already starting to dabble with things like chat or Gemini or any of those kind of large language models, you can keep abreast with this kind of stuff by just asking how is AI and advances, what is happening in the world of AI right now or in the last 2 weeks that are affecting workplace practices and things like that. It's fascinating just the kind of things that are happening on a week by week basis. But that's how you can keep up to date with what's going on. Because I think that's one of the problems that many of us have is that there's so much stuff out there. But why not actually use the AI itself to keep you informed and abreast of things? But that is all about the kind of tech advances. For me, a future PMO role, in fact, any kind of PMO role that we have, has always been about being able to utilize data and information to help decision support. Yeah. But there's other aspects of our role. I would call that very much, it's the left and right brain stuff that we do around PMOs. We've got the tech and the analytical type stuff that is always kind of be the bread and butter. It's just that we're going to get technology that's going to help us do some amazing, wonderful stuff with that. However, we've got the other side of the role that will continue and will continue to develop and change because our organizations will. So that's the things like the capability development, the maturity support that we have to do, the things that we do around maybe coaching and mentoring, development in terms of capabilities, the stuff that we do in terms of relationship building and making connections within our business between execs and other and our delivery teams. All of those kind of things that we've always called kind of like softer skill type stuff, which incidentally PMI now call power skill.
Power skills.
Those are very much going to be still there. Projects will continue to be a people business for sure. I can't see the robots taking over projects anytime soon, but it will be helping us do some of the information management type stuff smarter. So yeah, I think it's, thinking about how we continue to develop those kinds of side to our repertoire that at the moment, and I would say over the last 20 years, all we've seemed to have done is and let's bring it back to PMO learning because that's why you're here, is a lot of our development has always tended to be, a certification-based type training that gives us, a badge at the end of it, but tends to be more kind of like project management methods and approaches and things like that. So we've always said that organizations don't tend to want to spend money on developing us in our power skills. So we've got to think about how we
Yeah, absolutely.
do that ourselves. So again, maybe AI comes into our development and stuff. So I think that's, from my perspective, Eileen, I don't know if you want to add any more to that. Kind of just really passionate about it in terms of this all AI stuff. I love it.
Which is exactly why we brought the AI course into our portfolio at PMO Learning, haven't we? And I've put the link there in chat because actually just keeping abreast about what's available and what it does
Yeah.
and how organizations are using it. And I know that the course also covers off how it's used in particular roles is really important because as we've said before, Lindsay, part of the role of the PMO is making sure we understand how it's going to impact our organization because it's going to be the PMO who's going to have to be embedding it in the project management processes. Thinking about kind of the tools that we use in order for the PMO to perform their function.
Yeah, and I don't think it's any surprise that for any of you listening today that, Eileen and I also, have House of PMO. This is the PMO Learning is the kind of formal training and development art sister company to House of PMO, and they're running a poll at House of PMO right now asking about people's approach and what they're doing around AI. I think the last time I looked at it, there was about 60% were dabbling. starting to use some of it, but not bringing it in formally into any kind of PMO practices or processes.
But the interesting thing, isn't it, is that even though they may not be formally bringing it in as practices and processes, anybody who uses now an AI, sorry, a project portfolio management or project management tool, you can guarantee it will have some AI written into that
Yeah.
in terms of kind of how it deals with the data within the project management tool.
You'll be interested to know as well from the same poll that 0%, 0%, no PMOs are getting involved in trying to understand how AI will be used within the project management capability or delivery part of the organization. So there's no kind of strategic thinking going on there at all. Interesting stuff. Anyway, so let's move on. We've like I said, please do get ready to drop your question in, and we've got one from Hillary already, so we'll pick that one up. It's how important is sector experience when moving between industries, for example, from local authority to finance to healthcare to pensions. I'm sure some of you may have some insights of this of your own. If you do have some own, your own real experiences from trying to make the move, or you have made the move, please do drop them into chat, because Eileen and I's voices are not the only ones that should be heard in stuff like this. But my two penneth worth is a sector experience. It really does depend on what sector that you're moving from and to. Some organizations are a lot more precious about it than others. There's still those arguments that still, that if you're a public sector organization, if you're coming in from finance and banking, there's still that kind of little frown of, but do you really understand how we work around here? All of that kind of thing. So there's that problem, I think, is still something that is prevalent. Unfortunately, that also means that, sometimes some of the good ideas of bringing stuff in from different sectors doesn't happen as much. I think there are ways to overcome this issue, problem, challenge, whatever you want to call it, when you're actually looking to make a move from one sector to another. Yes, it's difficult, but I think you can, if you can get your foot in the door, in other words, you get to an interview stage, I think you can give a better account of why you're able to, bring a lot to the role, why you'll be good for the role, than trying to do it on paper, i.e. for a CV or indeed from a LinkedIn profile if you're using those to apply. What you can try and do is just highlight and bring out to the fore the PMO stuff, with the sector stuff just slightly pushed to the side. That's the bit that you want to make a big deal about in terms of, what is it that they're asking for in terms of the PMO role that you might be looking at or applying for, and zero in on that kind of thing. Yeah, it's trying to, you're trying to, what's the word? It's like you're trying to, it's not playing tricks, but it's just, you're just bringing into prominence what is actually more important
Yeah.
is the,
It's just putting it through a different lens, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So again, it really does depend on what, it's a lot, like a lot of these things. It really does depend on what sector to which sector. Some are more open and to bringing in more people. And I've noticed actually from some of the conversations we're having with people that have been working in the NHS, because for a lot of them have come from different sectors. Maybe that's a sign that either, they're open to other people coming in from different sectors because they're bringing a different kind of mind shift, or whatever. Or it is that actually you might want people from that sector to come to your organization, but it's not necessarily mean that those people are available and on the marketplace at any one time. So that's the other thing that also goes in your favor. An organization can try to have a lot of boxes that need to be ticked, but ultimately, if they really need somebody to come in and join in their organization, sometimes they start to take the blinkers off a little bit and start to think, right, okay, so it's if I can't get 100% of what I'm looking for, what am I willing to to say that actually it's maybe not as important as it could be. So that's my 10 penneth worth, Eileen. What about you? Got anything to add there?
I think it is about doing this lens. I've put in there about the House of PMO Essentials courses. We wrote those specifically that says this is kind of generic because it covers everything you might need to do, say in an analyst role in different types of organizations, recognizing that not all of those different areas are going to be have skills in the particular um organization that you're currently working in, or even the organization you're moving to. And I think what you need to be able to demonstrate is that you understand and have an awareness of those other areas that are going to be more important in the organization that you're hoping to move to, and demonstrate you have a level of competence already, and that you're looking to kind of strengthen that in the role that you're going to. So I think it's about not necessarily just saying, oh, it's all transferable, I can just move. It's recognizing and saying I've got a number of transferable skills which are relevant to any industry. I recognize in this industry that these 3 or 4 areas are going to be more important, and I have got experience in those areas. So it's about you demonstrating that your awareness of what that change might be and how your focus might need to change in that role.
Okay, great. Okay, Joanna, I'm going to come back to your question, but let's just take another one that we had before when we were, people were registering to attend this session. I love this question. Let me give you a bit of context because it's it's probably a bit more helpful. So this was from somebody, I don't know if you're on the session, I hope you are, joined an organisation with the intention of establishing a PMO. However, subsequently discovered that the committed executive sponsorship during the interview was not real on the ground. Should I continue in my role as a PMO leader as task, or should I throw in the towel? Eileen, that sounds like a good one for you to start with.
I remember a long, long time ago when the first PMO qualification came out in 1999 by David Marsh, and he said to me, if the organization doesn't understand your PMO, then get out of there because it's hard enough to get your PMO to work without kind of working in an organization that doesn't understand anything. Although I kind of agree with that view, I think it's about making sure you've kind of found out the right sponsor in your organization, and it depends on how much you love your organization, because I genuinely believe, and I've been in organizations where it's about keeping the ear to the ground and knowing exactly where you can make a difference, and being able to step in and say, that business problem that we're trying to solve. So, they won't use the word kind of project management or portfolio management, but that business problem that you're trying to solve, this is how the PMO can solve that. And I think that's that there is a sweet spot about being in the right place at the right time and being able to hear that message, knowing that you've got the skills and the capability in the PMO to be able to answer that. That
Mm.
really kind of lets you go through that. Um, I also think, we talk about doing some networking because sometimes the grass is always greener elsewhere. And is there that old adage that says if the grass looks greener elsewhere, start watering the grass where you are, rather than kind of doing a jump because it might just be your perspective of where the world is elsewhere. Though undoubtedly you'll always find PMOs that are more established, more valued, but you'll also find PMOs who are having an awful lot more bother and are less valued than where you are.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't really add anything
If
more.
you think of this
Excuse me.
series.
Shut up, Siri. I can't really add any more to it, but I can certainly sympathise with the frustrations of this kind of stuff that happens, and I think it does happen actually quite a lot. And I sometimes wonder when it comes to interview stages, where we have this bit about being able to ask some questions about how you can better question the interview. We hear it a lot, to be fair, and also, interviews where it feels like the interviews actually they're just fishing for information rather than there being a real genuine role there. That certainly seems to be another thing. But I would certainly. I mean, you may never get the straight answers in an interview anyway, but I think there's a part of due diligence if you can with this kind of stuff. And indeed, if it is a permanent role that you're going for, is to probably seek out people that you may know that work there, or friends of a friend, or whatever it might be, just to see what's really going on in that.
And this is interesting, isn't it, Lizzie? Because we constantly tell people to do networking, and the danger is people just start doing networking when they need a job. But the I think there's sometimes just kind of picking up about in terms of kind of wanting to throw the towel where it is. Sometimes sticking around, it'll pay off further on down the line. And what you need is some personal support as you kind of get through that. So building up your PMO network, so kind of building up people where you'll get that support elsewhere, but also that network will give you insights into other organizations for you to be able to make a better assessment. One of the things that we found as we've gone through over the last few years is actually not just asking questions at the interview, but doing some pre-qualification questions before you actually apply for the job to say, I'm about to apply for the job. Can you just clarify this, and this? Because, we've said, you apply for a PMO manager's job. You don't know whether you're going for project, program, or portfolio. You don't know whether it's kind of supporting an individual project and program. And sometimes the job descriptions are so broad. Yes, they've taken it from wherever, you still don't actually understand where it's at. So sometimes some pre-qualification questions are really useful as well.
Yeah, but good luck trying to get past all the bots to be able to ask those questions because
Oh,
yeah, I think these days is that there is a lot of AI in use that will do the front line kind of sifting and stuff. But just a quick note about that. I mean, what I would be doing is, well, I'll be using AI then to help me as to try and how do I get through this. Because again, I think we've done a session before where just looking at how you can utilize AI in the job hunting process because it's brilliant at doing that, but I wouldn't get it to be rewriting your CV, but it's certainly good at just trying to help you to maybe formulate some of the sentences on there, or, how do I make sure that this is going to be able to get through some of the bot kind of screenings? What can I be doing about that? Those kind of things. But yeah, it's a bit of a sad state of affairs. I think the problem with any recruitment process when you get people further and further away from actually having any kind of interactions, that's where it all seems to go wrong. But like I mean, Eileen had said there, the network of real people still is very much alive. And it is how a lot of jobs are, and were before AI came in, were filled. It's through people that you know. So yeah, absolutely the networking side. We from a next question then was from Joanna about this thing about if you've already got a decent salary but you want the next level up and the job, I'm assuming things like you may be a PMO analyst and you want into PMO manager, or I don't know. Maybe you can give us a little bit more detail, Joanna, if you want to come off mute and actually speak. Do you want to do that?
Hi, if that's okay, thank you. So I'm portfolio lead at the moment. I got promoted the beginning of the year, and I'm looking for, PMO manager or PMO director. Um, but all the adverts that I see at the moment on LinkedIn, where they do have a salary, is quite a lot low. I mean, a distinct amount lower. Um, than there is now. But it's again, as you just said about the job title doesn't always reflect what you think. So that was really good that Eileen that you mentioned these sort of pre questions to find out. But there's so many of them on LinkedIn, and it's just how much time you can dedicate
mm.
to that really.
Well, they often say don't find a job is a job in itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. I think we do see this as well, where people do become trapped. They become trapped in their role because they might be, and we talked about changing sector. If you're moving from say private to public, yeah, of course, there's going to be some drops in salaries there. But we do know of people in our own PMO network that feel trapped because it's almost like they're being overpaid. I'm not saying this, Joanna, but they're being overpaid for the role that they're doing today that doesn't bear out in the wider marketplace. I think you do tend to see that. But where do you go with it? And it really does depend, doesn't it? That comes down to an individual, what your feelings are about that. For some people, it's about being able to take a step back in order to make one forward in terms of salaries, so drop in and to move on. It depends really whether does that mean that you'll look at the role that you're in and see where you can go within the organization that will still give you some kind of challenge and want you to get out of bed in the morning. But it is a tricky one, and certainly because, and certainly here in the UK, we can't get away from the fact that the economics at the minute. We're getting a rough ride. I think we all are. Depending on, doesn't matter what job you're doing in life. We're up against it at the moment, and also hearing, that people are finding it tough to find work. And as soon as you get a marketplace like that, where there is a lot of people chasing a particular job, that means that those rates or salaries can remain stagnant or indeed lower than you believe that they should be. But it's that's the nature of the beast and where we are right now. In August 2025 in the UK, I think. Be interested if there's anybody here who's not from the UK, that might give us an insight in terms of their country and whether they're seeing that similar kind of thing. But it's like anything. So we talk about stuff like if you've got some precious skills, like you're saying, if you started to think about upskilling in some of the areas that you know is going to be changing fundamentally the way that project delivery may be supported by PMOs, you know that there'll be the tide will turn. And then at some point, the organizations will be like, oh, we need somebody with these skills. It happened with the whole agile big A, but suddenly, PMO roles, we need people that have got this kind of experience and these insights and this knowledge. It'll happen with AI and the advances around data, but when? Who knows? Who knows? That's really is the crystal ball, I think. Eileen, anything to add there before we move on?
No, happy we move on.
Right, okay,
Can't believe how much the time's flying.
yeah, so it is right. Well, this is don't want to get back into a thing here about like going into a particular, AI conversation again. But Eileen, I think this is one for you, and I think because you're experienced around a lot of this stuff. I mean, you're doing, we've got a governance course that we run, so a lot of people that are working and wanting to upskill around the governance stuff. I know you're very close friends with Roy, who also delivers our assurance
Yes.
thing. So, can we just talk a little bit about, because these are two areas that are kind of becoming interlinked with this whole conversation about, well, a PMO needs to be adding more value. It needs to be seen as a more strategic partner, a business function, all of it. These are the kinds of things that, and certainly have been different for the last 10 years. But actually, the governance course, for example, that we're running, which is not until December, is nearly fully booked. What's
Already.
is it and yeah, there's an AI bit there, but you can disregard that if you want because we've spoken about AI. But what about some of these areas like governance, like assurance? Is if you can talk to us about those, but are there any others that also might be seen to be good areas to be thinking about development in terms of where we, becoming more of a value add PMO? Long question, sorry.
So I think what we're seeing in organizations now is the multitude of different uh, ways that organizations are delivering change into the organization. So we've already talked very much around, kind of project management, program management, portfolio management, and we can all, I guess, if I ask the question, kind of name a delivery framework that works with those. But actually, how do we then map that into, kind of around the DevOps? How do we do that with product management? And I think this broader understanding of delivery frameworks and how and that to me is the link back to kind of the governance and assurance and the quality assurance, because the bit where we advise the organization that says we've got some stuff to do, how best can we deliver it without being overly bureaucratic? And that becomes a really important role at the beginning of the project that says, what is the best way of delivering this project within a risk envelope that we're happy to deliver to. So we can say really high risk, do it this way, really low risk, kind of do it this way, but actually understanding kind of what the risks are to the organization, this is potentially a kind of way to go. So without kind of developing kind of completely bespoke methods every time you deliver a project, to me, that's where some of the kind of the really interesting work is starting to come, without saying, well, it's either A, B, or C. Actually, it's a combination of all of them. And how do you put the right governance and reporting in with that kind of flexibility of method?
Yeah. I think what's interesting for me, and just to bring in the AI element, certainly here in the UK, with Projecting Success and their project hacks, they are starting to pick off more, going deeper into some of the verticals around project management. So I think they've just kicked off with risk management. So to be fair, for me, it's just making sure that we've got an in with those guys, and we have done for the last 5 years, because that's where I'm getting a lot of my insights from. Because actually, the real question here is how will AI affect project management? And it's only until that question and getting into some of the deep verticals of project management kind of areas that we will then be able to understand, well, where's the PMO duty around that, how will that change? Because I think we've got to remember that we as PMO people are supporting project management activity within the organization, because there's still a lot of work going on in this kind of how is AI going to affect it, and it's up to us to make sure that we keep up to date with what the developments are. And like I said, here we are, they're still trying to work out what are we, how will AI change our approach to risk management? It's exciting stuff. And if you're interested, do go and have a look at Projecting Success and follow its leader, Martin Paver, on LinkedIn, because he's forever sharing what they're doing and what they're coming up with. And it is fascinating. So let's just have a look at, unless you've got any more questions, we've got one more in here, I think. How to pivot my next steps after being a PMO analyst for over 9 years. Pivot, there's the word that came out of the whole
COVID.
agile agility stuff, didn't it? Pivot. How to pivot my next steps after being a PMO analyst for over 9 years. Well, you know what? The world is your lobster, is what I would say. I think we've done some sessions here at PMO Learning before about the PMO career path. And it's probably on the blog, and I'm sure Jen's going to frantically have a look at it. But we talked really about where you can go in terms of PMO analyst, and it's not necessarily up to PMO manager, and it's not necessarily specializing within PMO. It could be working in adjacent type roles. So you might want to think about maybe looking at stuff like maybe business analysis, data analysis, all of that kind of stuff. You could be thinking about moving out of PMO completely, but why would you want to do that? But you can obviously move out of PMO because you have got a lot of transferable knowledge, a lot of understanding about the business that you're in. So it could be moving and pivoting on to other things within the organization that take your fancy, which, you look around at your own business right now, what does that mean? What could that look like? You could be leaving completely. You could be leaving employment completely. You may be going self-employed, for example, staying within PMO initially, maybe doing contractor, or going even further than that and thinking about setting up some kind of PMO service type business, or indeed leaving PMO project management far behind, and hopefully, working within this kind of space for a number of years may have given you the confidence to set up on your own, doing something that you really love doing. Because I've certainly seen all of the above in the 20 odd years. I think it's actually more, but it's like 20, nearly 30 years. That's terrible. Nearly 30 years of people that I've met along the way and what they're doing, and what they've chosen to do in their careers. So that's my answer. Eileen?
Oh, well, I've just kind of dropped some stuff in chat. I think interesting in terms of being a PMO analyst, it's interesting to look at kind of where you've worked. So have you been kind of working at a project level or a program level? So moving up to an analyst and portfolio level would give you some new challenges and some kind of additional skills. And again, if you've been working in support, so you've been supporting a project or a program at an analyst level, you might actually want to move into a center of excellence or a standards. So instead of actually, and I've spoken to a few people we've done on the coaching where they've moved from being the benefits specialist in a program office, kind of working with programs, doing their kind of supporting them with their benefits management, actually kind of moving into a benefits specialist role where they've actually had to set up benefits management for the organization. I think that's a really interesting shift and certainly does kind of drive down your knowledge in a specialist area. So, if you've not gone into a specialist area, kind of think about kind of moving into a specialist area. Lindsay's already easy for her to say some of those areas where specialists are typical. So risk as specialists, definitely data analysis and reporting is becoming a specialism. Business cases, assurance, are also other specialisms. So looking at whether you want to become into a specialism or you terrify me, Lindsay, when you start doing things like leaving the organization and leaving the business. But certainly becoming a trainer. I've often said, if you want to realize how much you don't know, just try and teaching somebody what you think you do know. Because actually kind of moving into that kind of education, that kind of coaching role, you suddenly realize that people see things in a very different way to you, and trying to realign your understanding to embrace their perspective can be quite a challenge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, if you've got any more advice there, I'm going to stick that in our PMO Learning LinkedIn group. If you're not in that LinkedIn group, I think Jen will try and get that link in there as well. But this is the kind of place where you can keep up to date. If you're using LinkedIn, this means if you join the group, you'll get some of our stuff in your feed. But I'm going to put that question out there and see if we can find any other people to give advice on that one. Okay, I think we've got probably time for one more question. I can't see any more in the group. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong, but I have got one here, and it's perhaps not the lightest maybe to finish on. But here we go. This is another I think state of play really around PMOs at the minute. Is this whole kind of delivery models and becoming this more hybrid with agile waterfall and everything else in between, which I think you've also mentioned there, DevOps, product management being, two others. How do you see the PMO governance evolving to remain effective but not burdensome? I think there's a bigger question there about, how do PMO people deal with this kind of stuff? Because if this is going to be one of the things that you see in a job spec, for example, this is the kind of stuff that this is your environment that we're now working within. If you're not skilled up in these kind of areas, is this going to be a problem for you also as you make a move from one organization to another? Eileen, what's your thoughts on this? Because it's becoming more and more of I would say it's probably in the top five of things that people are talking about in terms of people working in PMOs today.
Can I do just a little bit of kind of I was going to say name dropping, but we'll do geography dropping, shall we? So while I was over in New Zealand, I met over with an old friend of mine who I used to work with in a previous life, and we were talking about some of the challenges that she was having in her current project. And one of the things that we established was that governance on her project had not been clearly articulated, because there was questions about who was making what decisions and how many decisions had been made. And at the start of every project we talk about having an integrated assurance and approvals plan. And I think what will happen now, that needs to be expanded, and we have to have a very clear, articulated governance structure. So in textbook land and in most organizations, we have a governance structure established via, the sponsor will kind of have a project manager. The project manager will have a project teams. Sometimes they have stream leaders, and we've got some very generic job descriptions around those roles. And because we've done things in the way we've always done them, I think that's kind of how we work. Whereas I think going forward, I think the governance structures around individual projects and programs will be more complex. Not necessarily more difficult, just more complex. And I think we'll need to spend more time setting up the governance structure for each of those individual elements, recognizing the different elements of delivery, but also more integration with business as usual, particularly through the kind of the DevOps and project management piece. So I think it will be, I think it'll be seen to be much more of a specialist role than it is at the minute. That may not necessarily sit within the assurance role. I think it might be actually a different role in its own right.
We certainly know how to make project management complicated, don't we? I've taught, and I say we, the people that are working within project management is how do we manage to do this? It should be pretty straightforward, shouldn't it, really?
But I think without getting too philosophical, the world itself, has become more complex as we've kind of things have developed. If you go back not that many years, project management was very straightforward, but organizations were relatively straightforward and structured, and the world has got more complex and organizations have got bigger and more complex to support that.
Yeah, but I think I don't think we've got any more questions, but I think that's a nice place to end because if you go right to the beginning and what we were saying about our, the future of PMO roles, what will they look like? That was one thing that we didn't pick up on really is that, it is our organizations
Yeah.
and how they're choosing to change. Again, like you say, it's different environments, different sectors have different issues and challenges and all the rest of it. This is why it's incredibly difficult, I suppose, to say, well, where any one PMO role might change. We can talk about generically, generic things, but I think ultimately it's going to come down to the type of organization that you're working within, what it is it does, and the sector is a wider piece. Is going to have its own individual things that are going to shape the roles of the project manager, the program manager, portfolio, and the PMO within it. That's what makes it so fascinating, and I think that's what we kind of sometimes forget. But certainly with PMO and coming back to that question about transferring, I still believe that good PMOs, regardless of where you're operating, have some really good fundamental things in place that can work within any organization. But it's just being able to take your knowledge and your experience and be able to change it, tweak it, modify it depending on the context that you're working within. And I think that's an interesting skill that we can all think about how we develop that. Because I think if you look at the things like they're in the PMO competency framework, because PMO learning has been working with organizations directly utilizing PMO competency framework. It's if you're not aware, there is something on our website that's now being released called PMO TNA, which stands for Training Needs Analysis, which is allowing people to actually start to pinpoint where's our development for our PMO team. And it's not necessarily things like the just looking at certification-based type training, but it is this kind of specialist areas. But what about those things that we really need? This kind of behavioral stuff about building resilience, being able to adapt, being able to change things if we need to. If our organisation is moving quite quickly and they need to pivot, are we able to do that? Do we have it within ourselves? Not only our competence, knowledge, skills, but our behaviours as well. So there's a lot that PMO people can be developing, and sometimes it's just not the obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eileen, final words from before we leave.
I think, I think you've captured it, but I think we have to realize it's not just skills and capabilities, it's also a mindset change. Is that, that whole kind of growth mindset about actually things are going to move in, and to remain current, we have to be happy to kind of move forward.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for taking part, and yeah, enjoyed it again. You've always got some interesting questions that again make us think. Sometimes
Absolutely.
there's no clear-cut answers to this kind of stuff, but one of the things you can be assured is that we know that we've got inquisitive minds, and we'll carry on trying to understand what is it that PMO people need. It may be completely different this time next year. We could be sitting here talking about completely different things, and that is what's fascinating about it. But you can be rest assured that PMO learning is all about making sure that we're there if you want to develop yourselves or your wider PMO team. Okay, that's it for now. Have a good rest of your day. We'll see you soon.
Take care.